The cold was the first thing Commander Daniel Hayes felt when his eyes opened. 300 years of frozen sleep had turned his bones to ice and his blood to slow rivers of frost. Red lights flashed across the ceiling of the cryogenic chamber as warning alarms screamed through the ship. Something had woken him up. Something important enough to trigger the emergency revival protocols that were only meant for one thing: the end of everything. Daniel pushed himself out of the cryogenic pod and fell to his knees on the metal floor. His muscles had forgotten how to work properly after centuries of stillness. Beside him, other pods were opening with hisses of cold vapor. His crew was waking up. 17 ships floating in the darkness at the edge of the solar system, and all of them were coming back to life at the same time. Lieutenant Moore was the second person to stand. She was young, only 28 years old when they went to sleep, but now she was technically over 300. Ice crystals clung to her brown hair and her skin was pale blue from the cold. She stumbled toward her station and began reading the data on her screen. "Commander," she said, her voice rough from centuries of silence, "we have received a signal. It is not human." Daniel forced himself to walk toward the main bridge of the USS Vanguard. The ship was old but powerful, built during the darkest years of human history when Earth believed that enemies lurked behind every star. The Vanguard and its 16 sister ships were the last defense of humanity. They were weapons of absolute destruction, hidden in the frozen darkness where no one would find them. They were only supposed to wake up if human civilization faced total annihilation. But this signal was not about Earth. It was about something else entirely. The message played through the bridge speakers in a language that the translation system struggled to understand. The voice was high and musical, filled with terror and desperation. "To any who hear this, the collective begs for salvation. The harvesters have come. Our worlds burn. Our children die. Please, anyone. We remember the stories of we remember the humans. Please help us." Daniel stood in silence as the message repeated. He had never heard of the collective. He had never heard of the harvesters. 300 years was a long time, and the galaxy had changed while humanity slept. Lieutenant Commander worked at the communications station, pulling data from the galactic network that still connected the stars. His face grew darker with every piece of information he found. "Commander, I have answers," said. 200 years ago, humanity signed something called the Treaty of Solitude. We from all galactic affairs and retreated to our home system. The other species were afraid of us. They called Earth because of how dangerous our planet was. They called humans monsters because of how we fought our wars. So we left. We went home and we stayed there." Daniel absorbed this information slowly. Humanity had become isolated. The galaxy had pushed them away because they were too violent, too aggressive, too dangerous. And now, centuries later, an alien species was begging for those same dangerous humans to save them. "What are the harvesters?" Daniel asked. Pulled up more data on the main screen. Images appeared showing massive biological ships that looked like living creatures. They moved through space in swarms of thousands, consuming everything in their path. Planets stripped bare. Civilizations reduced to ash. Species erased from existence. "They are a swarm," explained. "They have destroyed 14 spacefaring races in the past 1,000 years. No one has ever stopped them. No one has ever survived direct combat with their main fleet. The galactic community tried diplomacy. They tried economic pressure. They tried defensive alliances. Nothing worked. The harvesters just keep coming and keep consuming." Looked up from her station. The collective was a civilization of 40 star systems. According to this data, they have been reduced to 3 colony ships fleeing through empty space. They sent their distress call to every corner of the galaxy. No one answered except us. Daniel felt something stir inside his chest. It was an old feeling, something that had been frozen along with his body for 300 years. It was the feeling that every human carried in their blood, passed down from ancestors who had survived ice ages and predators and wars and plagues. It was the feeling that made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. It was the refusal to accept defeat. The holographic communication system activated, and 16 other faces appeared around the bridge. The captains of the other ships in the Deep Space Reserve Fleet had all received the same signal. They had all woken up at the same time, and they all had the same question in their eyes. Admiral Samuel Price was the oldest among them. He was 63 years old when he went to sleep, a veteran of wars that had been fought before most of his crew was born. His face was lined with scars and his eyes were hard as stone. "I assume you have all heard the message," the admiral said. The other captains nodded in silence. "The Treaty of Solitude says we are not supposed to interfere in galactic affairs," Admiral Price continued. "It says we are supposed to stay in our system and leave the rest of the universe alone. But I do not remember signing that treaty. I do not remember agreeing to hide while innocent people die." Captain Carter of the USS Retribution spoke up. "Sir, we have no authority to engage in military action outside human space. Earth Command has not given us orders." Admiral Price smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. "Earth Command put us out here for a reason, Captain. They gave us the most powerful weapons humanity ever built. They told us to sleep until we were needed. Well, someone needs us now. I say we answer the call." Daniel watched the other captains consider the admiral's words. These were warriors who had spent their lives preparing for battles that might never come. They had sacrificed everything to float in the darkness and wait for a threat that might never arrive. Now that threat had finally appeared, but it was not aimed at humanity. It was aimed at strangers they had never met. It did not matter. One by one, the captains voted. 16 hands raised in agreement. The decision was unanimous. "Set course for the coordinates," Admiral Price ordered. "Wake up all crew members and bring all systems to full power. We have a long journey ahead of us and a war to fight at the end of it." Daniel turned to and saw the same fire burning in her eyes. The humans were awake now. They were moving, and the galaxy was about to remember why they had been so afraid of that little blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The engines of 17 warships roared to life, and the darkness of the cloud was filled with light for the first time in 300 years. Part 2. The Legacy. The journey to the coordinates took 3 weeks at maximum speed. During that time, the crew of the USS Vanguard worked without rest to bring the old warship back to full combat readiness. Centuries of cold sleep had not been kind to the machinery, and every system needed attention before they could face the harvesters. Chief Engineer Cooper spent most of his time in the engine room, surrounded by tools and spare parts that were older than most civilizations in the galaxy. He was a large man with thick arms and grease permanently embedded in his skin. He loved machines more than people, and the Vanguard was his greatest love of all. "She is a beautiful ship," said to his assistant, a young engineer named Peter. "They do not build them like this anymore. Look at these power cores. Look at these weapon systems. This ship was designed to kill gods." Peter looked at the schematics on his tablet and shook his head in amazement. The Vanguard carried enough firepower to destroy a small planet. Plasma lances that could cut through any known material. Kinetic accelerators that launched tungsten rods at a fraction of the speed of light. Missile systems loaded with warheads that contained horrors Peter did not want to think about. "Why did humanity build such terrible weapons?" Peter asked. Laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Because we were afraid, boy. We were afraid of ourselves. We were afraid of what waited in the darkness between the stars. And when humans get afraid, we do not hide. We build bigger guns." On the medical deck, Dr. Torres was giving the crew their first comprehensive health check since the awakening. 300 years of cryogenic sleep had effects on the human body that were not fully understood. Some crew members had memory problems. Others had muscle weakness that would take months to fully recover. A few had aged slightly despite the freezing process. their cells betraying them in small ways. Was a small woman with kind eyes and steady hands. She had been a combat medic before joining the Deep Space Reserve Fleet, and she had seen what humans could do to each other in times of war. Nothing surprised her anymore. Lieutenant Commander visited the medical bay for her checkup and stayed to talk. Was the fleet's tactical coordinator, responsible for managing the AI systems that would guide their weapons in battle. She was nervous about what they were about to face. "Tell me about the harvesters," said. "Tell me what they do to the people they catch." Paused her work and looked at with serious eyes. "They do not kill quickly. They consume. They take living beings and break them down into raw materials. The victims are conscious for most of the process. The harvesters feed on fear as much as flesh. They have wiped out 14 species this way. Billions upon billions of intelligent beings dissolved and absorbed into the swarm." Felt her stomach turn. How do we stop something like that? Smiled grimly. "We do what humans have always done. We become more terrifying than the monsters we face." In the ship's training facility, Marine Sergeant was putting her squad through combat drills. The Marines had been frozen along with everyone else, but their skills had not diminished. They moved through the obstacle course with deadly precision, their powered armor amplifying their already impressive physical abilities. Was a veteran of 3 wars and countless smaller conflicts. She had scars on her body that told stories she never shared with anyone. She had killed more enemies than she could count, and she had lost friends whose names she whispered in her sleep. War was her life, and she was very good at it. "Listen up," called to her squad. "The enemy we are about to face is unlike anything you have trained for. They are fast. They are vicious. They will try to board our ships and kill us in close combat. They think they are the most dangerous predators in the galaxy." She paused and looked at each of her Marines in turn. "They are wrong. Humans evolved on a. Our ancestors survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and mass extinction events. We fought predators with nothing but rocks and sticks. We conquered our own planet by being meaner and more stubborn than everything else that lived there. The harvesters have never met anything like us, and when they do, they will learn what fear really means." The Marines roared in agreement, their voices echoing through the training facility. On the bridge, Commander Daniel Hayes received a communication from Admiral Price on the flagship. The Admiral's face was grim, and Daniel knew that the news was not good. "Our scouts have made contact with the survivors," Admiral Price said. "There are only 3 ships left, about 50,000 refugees in total. The harvesters destroyed everything else. 40 star systems gone in less than a year." Daniel absorbed this information in silence. 50,000 survivors from a civilization that once numbered in the billions. It was almost impossible to comprehend. "The harvesters know we are coming," the Admiral continued. "They have sent their vanguard to intercept us. 300 bioships, moving to cut us off before we can reach the. They will arrive at our current position in approximately 6 days. 300 against 17, Daniel said. "Those are bad odds, Admiral." Admiral Price smiled that cold, terrible smile again. "Bad odds for them, Commander. These ships were built to fight against enemies far worse than organic drones. We have weapons that this galaxy has never seen. We have soldiers who have been dreaming of battle for 300 years. And we have something that the harvesters do not understand." "What is that, sir?" "We have rage," the Admiral said. "Human rage, the kind that burns stars and cracks planets, the kind that turned a species of hairless apes into the most dangerous predators their world had ever known. The harvesters think they are hunters. They are about to discover that they are prey." The communication ended, and Daniel sat alone on the bridge, thinking about what lay ahead. In 6 days, the Terran Deep Space Reserve Fleet would engage in combat for the first time since its creation. They would face an enemy that had destroyed 14 civilizations without defeat. And they would show the galaxy what could do when properly motivated. Daniel opened a ship-wide channel and spoke to his crew. "This is Commander Hayes. In 6 days we will meet the enemy. They are coming to stop us from saving innocent lives. They think they can frighten us. They think they can break us. But they have forgotten something important about humans. We do not break. We do not run. We fight until the last breath leaves our bodies, and then we fight some more. So rest while you can, prepare while you can, and remember who you are. You are the children of Earth. You are the inheritors of 1 billion years of survival. You are. And it is time to remind the galaxy why that word should be spoken with respect." The crew of the Vanguard answered with cheers that shook the hull of the ancient warship. War was coming and humanity was ready. Part 3. First contact with the collective. The colony ships were floating among the wreckage of what had once been there. Commander Daniel Hayes stood at the observation window of the USS Vanguard and watched as debris from a dead civilization drifted past. There were pieces of buildings out there, pieces of ships, pieces of things that had once been alive. The harvesters had been thorough in their destruction. The 3 surviving vessels were small compared to the Terran warships. They were elegant craft with curved hulls that seemed to flow like water frozen in space. They had been designed for beauty and comfort, not war. They had no weapons that could scratch the paint on a harvester bioship. They were defenseless, and they knew it. Admiral Price ordered the fleet to form a protective perimeter around the ships. Whatever happened next, the refugees would be safe inside a ring of human steel and fire. Then he invited the leaders to come aboard the flagship for a meeting. Ambassador was the highest-ranking survivor. He had been a diplomat before the invasion, spending his life building relationships between his people and other galactic species. Now, he was one of the last voices of his civilization, and he carried that weight on his slender shoulders. Daniel was part of the welcoming committee when the shuttle docked with the Vanguard. The airlock opened, and for the first time in human history, a Terran crew stood face to face with living aliens. Was tall, very tall. He stood nearly 7 feet, with a body that seemed too thin to support its own height. His skin was covered in scales that shifted colors as he moved, going from blue to green to silver in rippling waves. He had 4 arms, each one ending in delicate fingers that looked like they had never known hard work. His eyes were large and golden, and they were filled with despair. Behind him came 2 other, smaller and younger. They looked at the human crew with a mixture of hope and fear. Daniel stepped forward and offered his hand in the traditional human greeting. "Welcome aboard the USS Vanguard, Ambassador. I am Commander Daniel Hayes. We received your distress call and came as quickly as we could." Looked at the human hand for a long moment before reaching out with one of his own. His grip was gentle, almost fragile. When he spoke, his voice was musical but heavy with sorrow. "We sent our call to every corner of the galaxy," said. "We begged the great powers for help. The consortium refused. The Federation said they could not risk their ships. The Empire told us that our fate was not their concern. Only you answered. Only the humans came." Lieutenant Grant, the ships, guided the delegation toward the meeting room. As they walked through the corridors of the Vanguard, looked at everything with growing confusion. The walls were covered in scars from old battles. The crew members they passed were short and sturdy, with bodies built for violence. The ship itself hummed with barely contained power, like a predator waiting to strike. "I must confess something," said quietly too. "When we sent our message, we did not truly believe anyone would respond. And when we learned that humans were coming, we were filled with doubt." "Why?" asked. Scales shifted to a darker shade. "The stories we heard about your kind were terrifying. We were told that humans came from a world of constant death, where everything was trying to kill everything else. We were told that you fought wars among yourselves that killed millions of your own people. We were told that you were monsters wearing the flesh of civilized beings." Nodded slowly. "Those stories are mostly true." Stopped walking and stared at her. "And yet you came to help us. Why?" thought about the question for a moment before answering. Because we know what it feels like to face extinction, because we have looked into the darkness and seen the end of everything, and because somewhere along the way we decided that being monsters was not enough. We wanted to be something more. We wanted to be protectors. The meeting room was filled with the captains of all 17 Terran ships, gathered around a large holographic display showing the tactical situation. Admiral Price stood at the head of the table, his face carved from stone. When entered and saw the assembled humans, his golden eyes went wide. "These are small creatures," he said to his companions in his own language, forgetting that the translation systems could understand him. "They are tiny and soft. How can they fight the harvesters?" Admiral Price smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. "Ambassador, I understand your concern. We are not impressive to look at. We have no claws, no armor, no venom. Our senses are dull compared to many species. We cannot run very fast or jump very high. By the standards of most worlds, we should have died out millions of years ago." He pressed a button, and the holographic display changed. It showed images of human history, armies marching across continents, cities burning in nuclear fire, weapons that could crack planets in half, soldiers fighting in conditions that would kill most galactic species in minutes. "But we did not die," the Admiral continued. "We survived everything our world threw at us. We survived predators and diseases and natural disasters and each other. We became the most dangerous thing on our planet, and then we reached for the stars. When we found that the galaxy feared us, we went home and slept. But now we are awake again, and we are very, very angry." Watched the images scroll past. He saw humans fighting in frozen wastelands and burning deserts. He saw them building machines of war, that imagination. He saw them laughing in the face of death and charging toward enemies that should have destroyed them. "What are you?" he whispered. Commander Daniel Hayes answered. "We are exactly what you called us for, Ambassador. We are the children of a planet that tried to kill us every day for millions of years, and we did not just survive. We won." The holographic display changed again, showing the Harvester Vanguard approaching their position. 300 bioships, each one a living weapon designed to consume and destroy. "They will be here in 2 days," Admiral Price said. "We will meet them in the nebula known as the Burning Veil. The stellar radiation there will disrupt their communications and force close combat. It is the kind of fight we prefer." Looked at the human admiral with new eyes. He was beginning to understand something important about these strange creatures from the violent planet. They were not just willing to fight the harvesters. They were looking forward to it. "You enjoy this," said. "You enjoy war." Admiral Price shook his head. "We do not enjoy war, Ambassador. We hate it. We know what it costs. But when war comes anyway, when innocent people are dying and no one else will help, we do what must be done. And we do it better than anyone else in the galaxy." Was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed his head in the gesture of deepest respect. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for answering our call." Daniel watched the alien ambassador and felt something shift inside his chest. They had come to save strangers. They had woken from centuries of sleep to fight a war that was not their own. And somehow, despite everything, it felt right. They had found their purpose again. Part 4. The Battle of the Burning Veil. The Burning Veil was a nebula that stretched across 3 star systems, a cloud of gas and radiation left behind by an ancient supernova. The stellar interference made sensors unreliable and communications difficult. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and the Terran fleet had arrived first. Admiral Price positioned his 17 ships in a crescent formation at the edge of the nebula. The colony ships were hidden deeper inside the cloud, protected by layers of radiation that would mask their signatures. Whatever happened in the coming battle, the refugees would be safe. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Vanguard and watched his crew prepare for combat. Every station was manned. Every weapon was charged. Every face was calm and focused. These were professionals who had trained their entire lives for this moment. "Contact," Lieutenant Moore announced. 300 bioships entering the nebula. They are spreading out into a hunting formation. Daniel studied the tactical display. The harvester ships were organic nightmares, grown rather than built. They had no metal hulls or mechanical engines. Instead, they were living creatures, each one a weapon designed by millions of years of violent evolution. They moved through space like predators through water, graceful and deadly. Admiral Price's voice came over the fleet channel. "All ships, this is the Admiral. Hold formation until they commit to their approach. Let them think we are afraid. Let them come close. And then show them what human fury looks like." The harvesters moved deeper into the nebula, drawn by the heat signatures of the Terran fleet. They had never faced humans before. They had studied the old records and found a species that had retreated from galactic affairs, that had hidden in their home system for 2 centuries. They expected easy prey. They were wrong. Captain Christopher Lane commanded the USS Retribution, an assault cruiser designed for close-quarters combat. His ship was the tip of the spear, positioned at the center of the Terran formation. When the harvesters came within range, he would be the first to draw blood. "Weapons hot," Christopher ordered his crew. "Target the lead ships. Wait for my command." The harvesters crossed the invisible line that Admiral Price had designated as the engagement threshold. 300 bioships, confident in their numbers and their reputation, moving to consume another helpless species. "All ships," Admiral Price said calmly, "open fire." The Terran fleet erupted with violence. Plasma lances cut through the darkness like the fingers of angry gods, slicing through harvester bioships with terrible precision. Kinetic accelerators launched tungsten rods at incredible speeds, each impact releasing more energy than a nuclear explosion. Missiles streaked through the nebula, finding targets and delivering payloads that turned living ships into expanding clouds of organic debris. The harvesters had never experienced anything like this. Their bioships were evolved to resist energy weapons, grown with thick organic armor that could absorb laser fire and plasma bolts. But the kinetic rounds tore through their defenses like paper. The tungsten rods were not energy weapons. They were just very fast rocks, and no amount of evolution could stop a rock moving at a fraction of the speed of light. The first wave of harvesters disintegrated in seconds. 50 bioships, gone before they could even respond. The survivors scattered in confusion, their hive minds struggling to process what was happening. On the USS Ironclad, Weapons Officer Benjamin Drake was coordinating the kinetic bombardment from his station. His screens showed the destruction in real time, tracking each impact and calculating damage assessments. He had trained for this his entire career. He had run thousands of simulations, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of watching an enemy fleet die. "Reload all accelerators," Benjamin ordered. "Target the carriers. Take out their command structure." The harvesters began to adapt. They always adapted. It was how they had survived for millions of years and destroyed 14 civilizations. Their hive mind analyzed the Terran weapons and began developing countermeasures. They changed their formations, spreading out to minimize the effectiveness of the kinetic rounds. They targeted the Terran ships with concentrated bioplasma attacks and suicide runs. The USS Stalwart took the first major hit. A swarm of harvester drones breached its hull on the starboard side, forcing their way into the corridors and compartments. The ship was in danger of being consumed from the inside. Marine Sergeant was waiting for them. Her squad met the harvester drones at the breach point, their powered armor gleaming under the emergency lights. The drones were fast and vicious, all claws and teeth and acid blood. They had torn through countless species on countless worlds. They had never met human marines. Fired her magnetic rifle in controlled bursts. each shot punching through the organic armor of the drones. When they got too close, she switched to her combat knife, a blade of reinforced steel designed specifically for fighting creatures that were immune to lesser weapons. She moved through the enemy like a storm, leaving broken bodies in her wake. "Push them back," she screamed over the squad channel. "Do not give them 1 inch of this ship." The battle raged for 18 hours. The Terran fleet fought with a ferocity that shocked the Harvester hive mind. These small creatures from the did not run when they took damage. They did not surrender when their friends died. They just kept fighting, harder and more vicious with every loss. The USS Sentinel was destroyed in the 12th hour of combat, overwhelmed by a concentrated assault from 60 bioships. Its captain, Maria, stayed at her post until the end, directing fire and shouting defiance as her ship came apart around her. Her final transmission was a string of coordinates, targeting data that her crew had collected in their final moments. The remaining Terran ships used that data to destroy the ships that had killed the Sentinel. It was a fitting memorial. When the battle finally ended, the nebula was filled with debris. 2 Terran ships had been lost, along with 400 crew members. But the Harvester Vanguard was gone. 300 bioships, the terror of 14 civilizations, reduced to drifting wreckage and cooling organic matter. Admiral Price surveyed the aftermath from his command chair, his face showing no emotion. "Damage reports from all ships. Begin rescue operations for any survivors in the debris field, and someone tell them that they can come out now. The immediate threat has been neutralized." Commander Daniel Hayes looked at the tactical display and saw the scale of their victory. They had faced an enemy that had never known defeat, and they had broken it utterly. They had proven that they deserved their name. But Daniel knew that this was only the beginning. The Harvester hive mind would learn from this battle. The main fleet would be coming now, thousands of bioships seeking revenge for their fallen. The real war was just starting. He turned to send a message to Earth. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them we need reinforcements." Nodded and began composing the transmission. Across the fleet, crews were celebrating their victory and mourning their dead. They had won an impossible battle. Now they needed to win the war. Part 5. The Awakening of Earth. The message from the Burning Veil took 3 days to reach Earth. It traveled through relay stations and communication networks that had been silent for 2 centuries, carrying news that would change the fate of humanity and the galaxy forever. President was in his office when the transmission arrived. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, elected to lead a species that had chosen isolation over involvement. He had spent his career managing domestic affairs and maintaining the Treaty of Solitude that kept humanity safe from galactic conflicts. Now that treaty was effectively dead. The message came from Admiral Samuel Price, a name that most people on Earth had forgotten. It described the distress call, the decision to respond, and the battle that had followed. It included casualty reports and damage assessments, and it ended with a request that made President's blood run cold. "The Harvester main fleet is coming, over 10,000 bioships. We cannot stop them alone. Earth must mobilize. The time for hiding is over." The President convened an emergency session of the Global Defense Council within hours. Military leaders from every continent gathered in the underground bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, the same facility that had been built during humanity's most paranoid era. They had hoped never to use it. Now they had no choice. General was the first to speak. She was the commander of the Strategic Reserve Forces, the hidden military that most citizens did not know existed. Her job was to prepare for wars that might never come. Now she finally had one. "The Deep Space Fleet activation protocols are clear," General said. "When one of our fleets engages hostile forces in defense of innocence, the full mobilization clause is triggered. Whether we like it or not, we are now at war with the Harvesters." President looked at the faces around the table. Some were afraid, Some were excited. All of them understood that everything was about to change. "How quickly can we respond?" the president asked. General pulled up a holographic display showing the solar system. Hidden shipyards on the moon began to glow. Orbital defense platforms around Earth and Mars came online. Military bases across the planet reported ready status. "We have 500 warships in reserve," General said. "They have been maintained in cold storage since the Treaty of Solitude was signed. We can have them operational within 2 weeks. Full mobilization will take longer, but we can send an initial force to support Admiral Price within the month." The Council voted unanimously to authorize the mobilization. For the first time in 200 years, Earth was preparing for interstellar war. 3 weeks later, the Harvester main fleet arrived at the burning veil. Over 10,000 bioships stretched across the void like a living wall, blotting out the stars with their massive organic forms. The hive mind had analyzed the battle data from the Vanguard and evolved countermeasures. They had grown thicker armor, faster reflexes, and deadlier weapons. They were confident that the small human fleet would be overwhelmed. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Vanguard and watched the enemy approach. His ship had been repaired after the first battle, but the scars remained. The crew was tired and grieving and determined. They had buried their dead among the stars and sworn to make their sacrifices mean something. "Admiral," Daniel said over the fleet channel, "the enemy fleet has entered the system. 10,000 contacts and counting. They will reach our position in approximately 6 hours." Admiral Price's voice came back calm and steady. "Understood, Commander. All ships, prepare for combat. This is going to be the fight of our lives." Was aboard the Vanguard as an observer. The ambassador had refused to hide with his people, insisting that he witness whatever happened next. He stood at the back of the bridge, his scales shifting through shades of gray that Daniel had learned to recognize as fear. "There are so many of them," whispered. "How can you hope to survive?" Daniel smiled. "We have a few surprises left, Ambassador." 5 hours and 47 minutes later, those surprises arrived. 500 Terran warships emerged from hyperspace behind the Harvester fleet, their engines burning bright against the darkness. At their head was the USS Dominion, the largest warship humanity had ever constructed. It was a kilometer long, bristling with weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. It was a monument to human paranoia and human engineering, and it was finally going to earn its existence. Admiral Victoria Shaw commanded the relief fleet from the bridge of the Dominion. She had been a young ensign during the last Great War, back when humanity was still learning how dangerous the galaxy could be. She had waited her entire life for this moment. "All ships," Admiral Shaw announced over the fleet channel, "weapons free. Leave nothing alive." The second battle of the Burning Veil was not a battle. It was an execution. The Terran fleet attacked from both sides, catching the Harvesters in a crossfire of kinetic rounds and plasma lances. The bioships tried to adapt, tried to evolve countermeasures on the fly, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of firepower being directed at them. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years were torn apart in seconds, their organic hulls no match for human weapons. The battle lasted 6 days. When it ended, the Harvester species existed only in historical records. Ambassador stood on the observation deck of the Vanguard and watched the debris field slowly disperse into the void. Tears were streaming down his scaled face, an expression of overwhelming emotion. "They are gone," he said. "The monsters that destroyed my world, my people, my entire civilization, they are actually gone." Daniel stood beside him, feeling a strange mixture of pride and sorrow. So many had died to make this moment possible. Human lives and lives, sacrificed to end a threat that had haunted the galaxy for 1,000 years. "What happens now?" asked. "Now we rebuild," Daniel said. "Your people will need a new home. We can help with that. And the galaxy is going to need a new structure, new alliances, new ways of dealing with threats. Humanity is going to be part of that whether we like it or not. In the months that followed, delegations from dozens of species came to Earth. The races that had hidden from the harvesters, the civilizations that had refused to help all of them wanted to meet the who had done what no one else could. The Treaty of Solitude was formally dissolved, replaced by the Terran Accords, a new framework for humanity's return to galactic affairs. Commander Daniel Hayes retired from active duty and became Earth's first ambassador to the reformed Galactic Council. At his inauguration ceremony, stood beside him as the representative of the collective. "You called us small and fragile," Daniel reminded his friend. Scales shifted to a warm golden color. "I have learned that your species measures strength differently than ours. You do not count claws or armor. You count the willingness to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Daniel looked up at the stars, at the fleet still patrolling the outer systems, at the future humanity had chosen. They had spent centuries in the darkness, sleeping and waiting. They had woken to find a galaxy in need of protection. And they had answered the call. They were home among the stars at last.